Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Our guest today is J.K. Amerson López, author of the book Embassy Kid. Kelly grew up in a U.S. diplomat family in the 1950s and 1960s in Latin America, Italy, and Spain. In this episode, Kelly shares stories from her book and her childhood growing up in the warmth of Caracas and Bogota, immersed in Spanish and the adventure of exploring Italy with her family unit. She learned to be a professional American overseas, but when she returned to the U.S. for middle and high school, the same skill set was underappreciated. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part one of Kelly's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
Hello, and welcome to the Round Trip Stories podcast. We have as our guest today, J.K. Amerson López. She's an author of Embassy Kid, and she goes by Kelly. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I love that we get to have another author and to share your stories. This is the appetizer, really, folks, that her memoir has so many stories in it, and we are just going to get to hear a taste of them. And hopefully by the time we're done with our interview with her, you will be excited to go out and get her book so that you can hear the rest of the stories.
Well, I've been thinking and writing about these stories for decades, so it's a thrill being able to share them with you.
Well, tell us, for starters, a little bit of your backstory, including the bird's eye view of where you grew up.
Well, when I was 6 months old, having been born in St. Paul, Minnesota, to a public relations executive from General Mills and a dance teacher, my parents packed me up on a propeller airplane and we went to Caracas, Venezuela on what was supposed to be a 2-year adventure where, quote unquote, the baby might learn some Spanish and and we would get out of the Minnesota winters for a couple of years in the warm South. Well, that 2-year adventure with the United States Information Agency turned into a 20-year career in Latin America, Europe, and Washington that really describes the period that I write about in my book, because I was an embassy kid.
You were, through and through, your entire childhood.
Yes. Well, the State Department moves its diplomats around every 2 to 4 years, something that I knew nothing about. I thought we lived in Venezuela. That was my home for almost 5 years, so that felt very permanent. But sure enough, my dad got tapped on the shoulder and got posted to Milan and then on to Rome, where we lived for 2 years. That was sort of felt like the permanent home for us in Italy. And I had started 4th grade when the tap on the shoulder came again, and we moved to Bogota, Colombia, back across the Atlantic to Latin America, and lived there through the end of my elementary school upbringing. So Venezuela, Italy, 3 different places, Colombia. And then we got the big prize. We got to move to the States. Lived here for 5 years, and that felt like forever. Felt like we were...
And which ages was that, or which grade levels was that you were here?
It was the tricky age, junior high and high school. So imagine little 7th grade self coming from Bogota in my ankle socks. No. But it was such a good grounding to learn. I learned my Americano in Maryland for those 5 years.
All right.
And then there was one more posting before I went on to college, and that was in Madrid, Spain. So I spent a lot of my childhood speaking Spanish.
So when did you end up coming back to the United States?
I came back to the States when I was 18 in 1973. And
Okay.
it was an odd situation because my family went back to the Foreign Service without me. So rather than
Oh,
me leaving home, they left me. And that
Mm,
moment, I think my mother and I felt that moment for the rest of our lives, realizing
yeah.
all of a sudden, oh no, that little family unit that's in that photograph,
Mm-hmm.
that unit is now down to 3, and that just is wrong.
doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because you guys had been each other's stability for all of those different places that you moved. It was, yeah. No,
The
that makes
girls,
sense.
Bob and Nan, that was the unit, and that was the pleasure of that
Mhm.
life.
So tell us a story about your initial transition and adjustment, what you can remember.
Well, I think initially, as I mentioned earlier, none of this felt foreign because I emerged from 6 months old into this
Mhm.
wonderful, warm, tropical climate, the warmth of our dear, nanny, Josefina. She
Mhm.
was my constant playmate. When my sister came along 2 years later, she joined in, and life was lived in Spanish with Josefina. So I never
Mhm.
thought twice about it other than I spoke English to my parents and
Mhm.
Spanish to Josefina because she didn't speak English. And I took it for granted that this was normal. Um,
Right.
and I think I only began to understand that it was a little unusual when we visited America. Every few years, Foreign Service people have to return to the designated hometown of the diplomat, and in that case, it was in the Midwest, in Minnesota, South Dakota for my dad and my mom. And going there, I realized, "Oh, no one here speaks Spanish." Right?
Hmm.
No one here
Mhm.
looks different. No one
Mhm.
here sounds different, and it's really cold. Uh, this
Right.
is the world is not all Caracas, but up until that time, I thought it was normal. I think my mother gets so much credit for that because she was a self-described homebody. She was really good at making
Mm.
a home. And to have to break up home and remake home and break up home and remake home without letting
Mhm.
on what a drama it was for her was a gift to my sister and me because we did not pick up on, uh-oh, this is terrible or this is going to be hard. It was just, woo, here we go. New adventure, new life. Let's go. So good for my mom to put up that front. Especially
Yeah.
years later, she revealed she went through depression every single time we moved.
Oh,
But
that's so,
Mm.
yeah,
yeah,
so hard.
really hard.
And
Yeah.
nowadays, people are more open about that. And then also through the internet, there's a lot of resources and counseling. But it doesn't change the fact that every time you move, many of the homemakers go through a little bit of depression.
Yeah, you have it all set out and you've got to break it up and hope for the best that you'll do it again and again. The State Department is also much better. They have a global liaison facility within the State Department that reaches out to spouses and children with lots and lots of support that didn't exist in the 60s and 70s when we were going through this. So
Mm.
good for them,
Mhm.
because life has
Yes.
gotten even more complicated since those years.
Mm.
Yeah, some things are easier, like communication, and other things are more complicated.
Um,
Mm.
so Kelly, tell us a story about something that you remember being hard for you or your family.
Yeah. I got a chance to have an immersion course in Italian when I went to first grade
There we
because
go. Okay.
I was the only American in my classroom of a traditional Italian school in Bologna. It was very traditional, rote learning,
Okay.
stand up
Yeah.
when the teacher comes in. We had to take dictation in cursive, and any mistakes
Mm.
were handed back to us in red ink to be
Mm-hmm.
copied over in a notebook that was called the bella copia, the perfect notebook.
And this was all in Italian. And
Yes,
you spoke Spanish.
And now you're in first grade in Italy, so now you're learning Italian.
right. I'd been living in Italy for about 6 months. So I was treated no better and no worse than any other kid in that
Mm-hmm.
classroom. We went to school 6 days a week, long
Oh,
days.
6 days.
6 days, Saturdays were included in
Mm.
those years. And I know from talking to some other folks that the Italian schools can be, or maybe it's European schools, very focused on producing the right thing. And
Mm.
it's not Montessori method at all. So
Sure.
one night I was finishing copying my bella copia, making it perfect with a dip ink pen with India ink
Mm.
and a nib that you put into. I looked like a person from a century earlier. And I yawned, and all of a sudden I felt my hand tap something. It was that bottle of India ink all
Oh,
over my
no.
bella copia. Oh, the world was over. There was
Yes.
no way to cheer myself up. I knew I was gonna have to face Signora in the morning with this messed up blob of a notebook. No way I was gonna be perfect that next day, and the world would be
Mm-hmm.
over. And,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I kept trying to be perfect, and of course, one never is, and at some point, you have to
Mm-hmm.
come with a reckoning of that. I don't know if it's that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also feel like being part of an embassy family required a little bit more perfection because you're on stage more? You're representing the United States?
I was a professional American. That's how I thought of myself. We were dad's job. You know, w our family was defined by my father's employment. So if somebody worked for IBM and someone worked for the United Nations and someone worked for the Italian Chamber of Commerce, my father worked for the American Embassy. We came pre-packed. "Oh, she's the embassy kid." And they gave me certain privileges and characteristics, that were assumed. And you know how to look people in the eye. You're very good at shaking hands. You know how to hand out the hors d'oeuvres at a cocktail party.
Which are great characteristics, right? We all want our children to look people in the eye and shake their hand. And I don't,
Exactly.
maybe we don't have cocktail parties anymore, but
Yeah, it's a good way of being in the world.
But if you feel like you have to always be on your best, and yeah, it can seep into other areas of your life and cause problems. Absolutely.
It can. I was,
okay.
in my 20s before I got a B minus, and my husband watched me cry as if I had lost my best friend and said,
Hmm.
well, that was some time coming, and then we moved on, so I've been much better since then.
Okay, I'm glad you've been much better.
I don't worry about being perfect anymore.
Well, yeah, Kelly, tell us something that you loved about being an NBC kid.
Well, I loved the adventures of being with my family. My parents were both very open to wherever we were living. we wanted to see it, to taste it, to experience it.
Hmm.
Weekends in Milan, we would go for drives up to the Lake Country and see Lake Como and have spaghetti with the fishermen and uh, go to Venice. We never were staying in. We certainly weren't on an American compound. Um,
Hmm.
when we moved to Rome, we were closer to the southern part of Italy, and we spent my sister's birthday, New Year's Eve, down in Sicily, and spent another summer on the Isle of Capri. Just wonderful experiences that my parents ate up and wanted to share with us girls.
Mhm.
We were very free. This was before security became such a concern. And even
Mm.
in Colombia, where they were going through a harsh period called la violencia, the violence, we explored the countryside, with great safety. There was no fear of
Mhm.
driving out on the carretera to go to the salt mines or go down to the warm country. Those concerns have gotten much more, real now, and
Yeah.
I think it's a
Yeah.
little harder to have that disappear into the country as if you were from there, then.
Right.
But I loved all of that, and when I've had the opportunity to travel as an adult, I seek those things out still. And when my husband and I visited Rome a few years ago, I couldn't wait to show him my Rome because it was still my Rome.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh my
Mhm.
goodness, what a beautiful trip that must have been.
Oh,
Um, I think about how sometimes children do have more freedoms growing up overseas than they might have in the United States. I mean, even today, when I raised my children in China, even though it's a communist country, but they actually had a lot more freedom to roam around, and the whole neighborhood was watching out for them. It was a very collectivist kind of feeling, and I did not mind that because I had all the nine-eyes, all the grandmas watching over my family because they knew where the Wagorins lived, they knew where the
Mhm.
foreigners lived. Yeah, I really loved just exploring with my kids, and I'm
right.
grateful. I feel like they still have that.
They will always have that. They will always have that. And if they ever have the chance to go back, can you imagine? It'll be like an explosion in their heads because when you move, the the past disappears. It's as if that country disappears, and if you get a chance to
Right.
go back, you realize it's magic. It's still there. And I've had a chance to do that in a number of the places I've lived, and it has been nothing short of miraculous to say, "You mean I could still hop on an airplane and go there?" You know?
And we should do it if we can.
Yes.
I remember one of the, recommendations from a friend of mine who had a overseas experience and then came back, and she said, "You need to go back to China with your kids to be able to show them." And it created a little closure, so, about the 2-year mark of being back in the United States, we went back to China, to Wuhan, and it was just so good for all of us because some of the kids were still there, because it only had been 2 years, but some of them have moved on because families move on, and they got to see the school, and I
Yeah.
think that was really helpful, especially because it was before COVID. So there was no way we were going back to Wuhan after that, and then also prices are exorbitant now. So,
Yeah.
yes, if we can, going back to where we grew up is
Yes.
such a beautiful
Mhm.
experience.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It feels
Mhm.
like magic because you can't go back into the past, but you can go back to those places
Mm.
and new
Mm.
places.
Well, tell us something that surprised you about living overseas now that you have had lots of time to reflect on your childhood.
Well, the thing that surprised me at the time was when we finally had a chance to move to America. Aha, I thought, this is going to be the easiest move yet. I am an American. I'm a professional American. This will be a piece of
Mhm.
cake. Well, I knew the language, sort of, but I didn't know the culture. And
Mhm.
I was very much a little girl, a sixth grader, who just 2 months later approached seventh grade wearing ankle socks. And I got into the school and looked around myself and saw a girl I knew, a friend from Rome, who took one look at my ankle socks and said, "Nobody wears those to seventh grade." And she ditched
Oh.
me. She didn't even sit with me at lunch. So I sat down at lunch and quietly rolled those socks off my feet under the table like nobody's looking. And
Yeah.
my shoes clattered all the way to Spanish class. And then in Spanish class, things got worse because the teacher said, "Buenos dias, clase." And I answered, "Buenos dias, profesor." And nobody else had said a word. And the other kids were
Mm.
like, "Who's that? Who's she? What does she get off being so Spanishy?" And I thought,
Mhm.
"Oh my gosh, this is not the walk in the park I thought it was going to be. This is
Yeah.
this is another life that I have to learn how to blend into." And
Mm.
in many ways, America was harder for those reasons, but also
Mhm.
there was a hierarchy. These kids had been at school together all the way through elementary school. The cliques were formed. It wasn't like an international school where people are coming and going all the time and
Mhm.
everyone is someone else. In America, these were just kids in the suburbs of Maryland, and I didn't have a spot there. It took
Mm.
me a couple of years to learn the tricks and the language and the hairdo and, oh, don't speak Spanish. I took French instead, and
Mm. Smart.
yeah, and of course, French came super easy to me because I spoke Spanish,
Right.
but I never
Because you
let
do Spanish and Italian and
exactly, yeah,
Just
give me
add
French.
another romance language.
But I figured I'm just gonna plod along like everyone else, not be
Mhm.
different. And,
Mhm.
by the time I made it through 11th grade, I was an American pom-pom girl with long blonde hair and a tall blonde boyfriend. I had made it. Took
That's right. You had arrived.
Oh, there's a wonderful author named Sarah Mansfield Tabor who is about my age, went through the same experience, and talks about by pressure and molding, I had finally forced myself into being ordinary. I made it. I made myself to be ordinary. So that was the surprise of those
Yeah.
18 years
Mhm.
and the 4 of us together. In Washington, the 4 of us went 4 different directions, so I lost all my moorings there, and that was hard for all of us, especially my mom.
So, what would you say that you learned about yourself through those years and all of those transitions and growing up abroad?
Yeah. Well, I learned that I uproot very easily.
Mm,
I reroute very fast. And then
that's good.
it is, those are both good things. It's never my idea to change,
Mhm.
but if someone uproots me, like, "Oh, guess what? Tomorrow you're gonna be Italian," I go with it, and
Mhm.
I drop the present, I let go the friendships, I forget about the house, and I move forward. So I uproot easily, I reroute fast, and I make friends super fast. Tracy
Mhm.
and I were talking about building community. I find that I reach out to people to establish a community for myself that includes them. And
Mm-hmm.
inevitably, whether it's let's have a club or let's have a networking organization or let's have mermaids in a swimming pool, it's always let's do something together as a community.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So, Kelly, I know that in about 2013, you moved from upstate New York to Florida to retire. Is that
right.
what you did?
That's right.
I was thinking about how that ability to make friends and to bring people together must have really helped in those retirement years.
It absolutely did. The ease with which my husband and I transferred ourselves from upstate New York to South Florida was shockingly easy. Um, and we explained to our daughter, honey, we're not from upstate New York. Of course, I've lived at all these places, and my husband's from New York City. And she looked at us appalled and she said, but I am. What?
Mm.
But I thought, how did that happen? But no, I think we found this house and set down roots so fast. The first night we
Mm.
lived here, there was a board meeting. So I went to the board meeting. That's where you go to meet people,
The
right?
first
There you go.
The
night.
first night. We
There
were
you
You
go.
you
first night.
knew.
I did. And guess who I met at that meeting? The woman that is now my best friend from Bogota,
Aw.
Colombia. She's a Bogotana. So
Oh,
she made the transition super easy, and she and I were the beginning of a wonderful
that's amazing.
network of women in our community that continues right to this day. But
Oh.
yes, it
Aw.
definitely it shocked the people I left behind in upstate New York didn't hear from me, and that surprised them. And
Mm.
that's part of the model. You drop the present and you move into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, as you were talking about how you move and you can uproot and reroute easily, I was wondering what the downsides of that are because, I think that for almost pretty much any strength, somewhere there's a flip side that we may be weaker in something because of that. You can't be really good at holding on to relationships from other places if you're also simultaneously really good about just being all in where you are. We can't do it all. And I feel like I'm a little bit like that too. I don't know if I'm as fast to connect and I haven't moved nearly so many times or anything, but wherever I am, that's where I am. And I'm not great at keeping connections with people if I don't see them or live in the same place. And I've had to just accept that about myself. But it's hard if you leave and the people that you left are thinking that you're going to or wishing that you would stay in touch and because you're gone and they miss you and
Yeah.
that can be hard and sad.
Yeah. You
But
well, it makes you seem like a very shallow friend to just leave and that's it.
mm,
And that definitely is a downside. Um,
yeah.
of course, when I was a kid, there was no internet, there were no cell phones.
Mhm.
Uh, the ability to stay in touch was through letters only. Could I have written
Mhm.
friends and kept that going? Yeah, but I didn't.
So, for our final question, um, for this first part of your interview, what would you say that you have learned about the world as a result of your life living abroad?
The gift that my parents gave to my sister and me is showing us that there is a world. There
Hmm.
is a world beyond the block that you were born in, and that the world is varied and it's accessible. All you have to do is get on a boat or an airplane or a train, and it's there. And you should see it. You should explore it. You should be
Mhm.
curious about it. When I get on an airplane, even now with TSA and long lines and all the hassle of flying, I still get a little shiver of excitement because at the other end of this trip, the doors will open and I'll be in a new world, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota from Florida or whether it's Holland or whether it's Italy or Colombia one day. The world is real, and languages are a key to opening up that world and is just waiting at the other end of the trip to be discovered.
Yes, I love how you were saying that the languages are the key to opening up the world. And yes, you can go and travel and people will speak English to us, but if you speak somebody's language, that opens up many, many more doors and helps us to have the understanding, a deeper understanding of people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
You're making me want to go get on a plane.
Good. Let's
Let's
go.
Go.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's
Well,
go.
and this is the beauty of this podcast is that we can listen to these stories and meet these wonderful people, but we don't have to get on a plane. And like
Right.
you say in one of our taglines, Melissa, it's no
Mhm.
passports, no packing, no goodbyes required.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I love that.
Yes.
Well,
Although the places that we can get to when we do the packing and say the goodbyes, take our passport, are pretty amazing.
they're pretty
But
amazing.
this is a good alternative.
Yeah, this is a great alternative. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing your round trip stories from growing up in a U.S. diplomatic community in Venezuela, Italy, Colombia, and Spain. Your family was a tight unit, and as long as it was Bob, Nancy, and the girls, you felt at home. The hardest foreign assignment was the time back in the United States, where your unit was split up in the daily routines of school, work, and homemaking. You fought hard and succeeded to fit into American teenage culture of the early 70s, and your mom silently battled the depression of facing ordinary life back in the U.S. Then the call came again for your father to be sent overseas. Your family could return to being a close American diplomat unit, and that felt right. So, what happened when this embassy kid returned for good to the U.S. for college? You'll have to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of Kelly's round trip story.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first-class seating? Be sure to subscribe to this podcast in your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, would you consider sharing it with your fellow globe-trotting friends? We would love to encourage them too. We believe that sharing stories helps our understanding of the world grow larger while the distance between us grows smaller.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.